Michael Russell from Beyond Instinct, and this is the third episode of our podcast. And today I've got Tim Britt with me.
Hello.
Tim is going to introduce himself in a minute. He's part of Orca Intelligence and he loves strategy. So fire away, Tim. Introduce yourself.
Is that all I love? Is that all I'm known for is strategy?
I don't know. I guess at the moment.
Okay. Well, yeah. So, introduction. So, hello, I'm Tim. And as Mike said, I've been working with Orca for a number of months now. As a business, I think it's fair to say that it's been evolving in that time. And I suppose I'm looking to use my experience to help the business move forward and work with customers who are interested in exploring ways in which they can grow. It's quite a bit buzzwordy, but through a co-design process that allows the business to grow and the people within it at the same time. So, yeah, and we're getting somewhere with it. I think we've started to get some traction, some interest from people, and it's great because it I suppose confirms what we thought or theorized on, that people are interested in developing their business in this particular way, where it gives people the opportunity to, I suppose, be empowered, take responsibility for their part in a bigger picture in what a business is trying to achieve.
Perfect. And so if you just talk about yourself a little bit and your background and kind of what allows you to do that.
So a bit about myself and my background. So I got into strategy as a result of so I'd worked in marketing for a number of years, and I worked as a marketing manager for an engineering company that was in turnaround, and the MD that came on board was an expert in lean manufacturing. He brought with him a strategy process, which, being part of their leadership team, I became involved in designing and delivering. So it wasn't just a case of this is the strategy, go do. It was a collaborative co-design process that gave people the opportunity to input, so you could have real healthy debate about what the business was trying to achieve and why. And I loved it. I loved it straight away. I had obviously personal experience of the impact of it on me professionally. And then within the wider business, the way that you went out to the organisation and explained what it was trying to achieve, I think really helped in terms of, because a lot of the time strategy will require change. And change can provoke anxiety in people. I know you love change, you thrive at it, but not everybody does.
I do.
And so it gives you the opportunity to create a narrative around why it's necessary and help them understand what their role within that change process looks like, which is easier for people to digest and get on board with. And it was a really great experience. And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I kind of branched out from marketing, although marketing still is useful because obviously you're taking the external and the customer perspectives, and you're able hopefully to create a compelling storyline, which is all part of the process, but then also help organizations decide what they want to be in the future and how they're going to get there. So I got into that, kind of went off and tried to do my own thing with a colleague of mine at the time, which kind of worked and didn't work at the same time. It was a good learning experience. He still runs the business we started. He's a really talented designer. He runs an animating studio. So we that's kind of what it's ended up being. But yeah, one way or another, I've ended up obtaining experience. I worked for a really nice guy called Terry, who runs a strategy firm in London. He had vast amounts of experience, like 20 years with Arthur Anderson Consulting, was one of the founding members of that business in the UK. I got the opportunity to work with him and work on a number of his clients. Then moved on to work with a business called Marshall Skills Academy and helped them to develop their strategy and go through the whole org design, and that was really interesting. And I think at some point that's where maybe me and you met. Maybe was I still at Marshall's? I may have just left, actually. I think I may have just left Marshall's, and then I worked independently as a consultant, and that's where we met. Yeah. And then we've obviously been talking for a couple of years, and that's led to where we are today with Orca, trying to be what it wants to be and hopefully moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that's good. I think that sums that up quite well. And obviously we jumped straight in on who you are and what you do. But I think for this podcast, obviously, we want to talk about, two things. We want to have something at the end of it that you can give to everybody else that they can take away and do something with.
Okay.
Which I've just put Tim completely on the spot.
I think about that.
So as all strategic people, they really like to be on the spot without any planning. So that'll be good by the end of it. And I guess the other thing is, we want to be having a conversation about strategy, not in the sense of Orca or anything along those lines of working with us, but just strategy. I think it's a word that's thrown around a lot these days. What does it mean to you?
Strategy. So it's helping an organisation decide what it wants to be and how it wants to get there. So I think, typically in the past it would have been considered, how do you create unique capability that other organisations can't copy? And there is still an element of that. If you can do something that nobody else is doing, you're going to be very hard to compete against. But for me, it's understanding, as I say, what an organisation, what a business wants to be, helping it understand how it's going to get there. And then part of what I do is to obviously manage that process so that they can be adaptable in real time to the external factors, the uncertainty of the world, and as things change, if they need to adapt, they are capable of doing that because they're continually assessing where they are. And it's not a case of having broadly speaking, we want to be the number one company in whatever industry we're working in, and we have a rough idea of what we want to do, but we're just going to jot it down on paper, stick it on a shelf somewhere, and just get the business moving forward. And it's not necessarily as coordinated, I think, as it would need to be to execute a successful strategy. So it's giving organizations the opportunity of being something different and helping them understand how they need to get there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that where I come from for strategy, I think is you can kind of have a strategy in anything really, but it depends on how that strategy lands. So when I first started, I think my strategy was we need clients, which is obviously a pretty simple strategy. And I think that where we are today and where we are with Tim is that as your company grows beyond 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 employees, a owner-led strategy can start to fail you a little bit, I think. I think up to that point, it's quite clear because everyone's so close to the owner that the unsaid is easy to understand. So you can have probably a vision and just talk about that vision enough and people work out the rest. But I think that as the company gets bigger, the different departments don't talk as easily because it's larger, etc. So everybody needs to have one vision, one goal, and a strategy to achieve it. Do you say that's one more?
I think you are probably better equipped to answer that question, because the truth is that's the experience that you have. That's something that you've gone through. I've typically worked in those organisations where they're not massive, they're a little bit bigger, but they've possibly already been through that, and they've experienced the pains of, you know, taking that mentality when you're an owner operator, and trying to apply that logic to a bigger business where there's more people involved, more moving parts, has proven to be challenging, let's say. And so they've recognised that, and they've had to look for another way of doing it. In that instance, this process is a great way forward, because it's like we say, it's co-design, it's collaborative. People can feel engaged in what the business is trying to achieve. As we mentioned earlier, they can understand what it is, or what their roles within that actually need to look like. And it takes a lot of pressure off, you know, like one person who's trying to manage 30 people instead of maybe 4 or 5.
Can't do it.
You can't. And you found you can't do it, and you're going to have department heads, and it just becomes a completely different beast. So you know, so to bring people along on that journey, you need to, or I found anyway, to engage with them at the earliest possible point to help them be part of the process to design what the future looks like, is a really great way of obtaining engagement. And we all know, you know, the more engaged an organisation is, the more likely they are to be successful. So, yeah, that's my experience of it, I suppose.
I think that what we're saying here is obviously that one of the things that we lean on is we lean on people strategies. That's what we're quite strong on. We're very people, if that's the right way.
People.
But I think you can have strategies on anything. And I think that that's kind of where I think it gets lost. So I think that when I used to go to various different networking meetings, there's always someone there that wants to sell me a strategy, whether it's marketing, business, life, could be anything. But I think the thing is making sure that the strategy is actually executable, I think, and also manageable for the company as well, and adaptable. So like we could have you could have a business strategy, but you could actually put in a strategy for the business to be adaptable. So
yeah, well, you could, part of the, you know, if you want a business to be successful and operate in a particular way, then you can ensure that the organisation is designed with adaptability in mind. So and I think on that point of everything being a strategy, I think the word strategy, it's a bit like, you know, innovation. It's probably quite overused. And I think businesses should have one strategy, and they should have plans on how each individual department, and Alison, who we work with, would share this opinion, I think, without talking out of turn. But, you know,
she's in the room. So
she's in the pipe. She can hear. Yeah. But you'd have a marketing plan on how you're going to achieve your business strategy, and you'd have an HR plan. You'd have, you know, rather than having 4, 5, 6 strategies that feed into a strategy, that's not really, in my opinion, how it works. You have one overriding strategy the organisation is aligned to achieving, and if you need to design the organisation in a different way to help it achieve what it wants to achieve, then you go about doing that. And that's kind of the process. So people, and it's a difficult one to sell strategy, because I see strategy as being an enabler, you know, of growth. So, you know, what I've learned is that it develops leadership capability within the business, going through this process where you have to get yourself out of your silo, you know, your own individual world, and understand and recognize how your actions have, you know, implications for other people, other parts of the business. Being able to identify those interactions, you know, you might want to, it's a holistic process. So once you start to understand that, I think you can start to almost change your own behaviours, certainly your own thinking. So if I do this, is that going to affect Brian over there who's trying to deliver his skills matrix, because I'm taking resource away from him, and then that's going to stop him from moving. So you have to start thinking differently about your role within the business and how your actions can affect other people. And that's kind of a good way, I think, of explaining strategy. You know, if I want to achieve this, how is what I'm going to do going to affect somebody else? And therefore, it's going to change your behavior. Do I have a conversation with this person before I make the change myself? Or do we, you know, sit down collectively and agree we've just not got enough people to make this plan a reality? So what decision do we come to? Do we drop something? Well, we've already agreed as a group, this is critical to us achieving what we want to achieve, so we can't drop it. Or what do we do? Do I take resource from somewhere else? Do we go to market and employ someone? What's decision collectively we come to help us move in the right direction? Does that? I can't remember what the question was. Do you think that answered the question?
Maybe. It sounds like forecasting. Resource forecasting.
Yeah, that's got to be part of strategy, right? That might fall under the responsibility of HR, but it's still going to feed into what the business is trying to achieve. If you haven't got the resource, it's going to flag up, right? This is not working.
It's going to flag now or later, isn't it? And strategy flags it now versus later. I think you're probably holding people down. There's probably a bit of coaching in there, a bit of challenge in there, and you're really pushing people to think beyond today. What is this going to look like, really, versus somebody going down that line and finding out. Now, I'm a classic of going down the line and finding out, but as Tim said, I love change. So to me, it's not harmful. I'm happy to change on a day, let alone anything else. But a team as they grow, don't like change daily, obviously. There will be some out there that do. And a lot of the staff that I work with like change. But if you're trying to change daily, that's hard for people to keep up with, especially the big team. If you're a small team, 2 or 3 people, quick phone call, you can flip the business overnight. If you're in an organization, 30, 40, 50 people, the CEO sends you an email saying, by the way, yesterday we were selling water bottles, today we're selling this. That's a huge change and people aren't ready for it. And that's because they've caught themselves out down the line versus doing the groundwork up front. So I feel like just talking out loud, but that makes sense, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, essentially it's laying the foundations, right?
Yeah, so I think what we're talking about is where, as a business owner, business leader, whatever you want to call me, I've got a very strong vision. We're pulling that vision out, or if there's a board of us, we're pulling the vision out of the board of us, and then we're putting it into actionable plans per department, per person, and ensuring that everybody is engaged and on board.
That sounds about right, if that's what you're doing.
I think so.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we're talking about. Now, the reason I'm talking about it so much is because I used to hate the word, but I used to hate the word marketing as well, which I admitted on a couple podcasts before. And I think that there's a lot behind strategy, marketing, all those kind of things, where there's a lot of people that will give you a strategy, you're left with it, and nothing changes. And you spent thousands of pounds, and at the time you thought the world was going to be incredible, and it's not changed. There's no difference. And I think that's probably why I fell out of love with it, because I had some really good engaging sessions, 2-day sessions. Yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're going to come back. I've got all my KPIs. I've got OKRs. I've got everything else in between, what we're going to do. I'm geared up. I come into work. This is years ago, probably, when we were a bit smaller, probably about team of 5. I'm like, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to be a business owner, not an operator. Here we go. And then within about 3 hours, I've had phone calls, emails, and everything else, and the strategy's disappeared. And I think that that's not necessarily the strategy's fault, but maybe part of the strategy is a pre-strategy of, that's all great. All these frameworks will help you grow a business, but is your business ready for it? And you might need a pre-plan to get you to where you need to be. So I now do believe in strategy, and we have strategies, in the companies. Some are looser than others, but we do have strategies, and we hold people and the company accountable to it. But what, if we're looking at this is going out to, well, it's going out to everybody, but I guess the most people are going to be SMEs. 8 to 30 people this is relevant to probably at the moment, maybe a bit more, but 8 to 30 is probably where we're relevant. What is going to be the difference between a strategy session and a fun, engaging strategy session? I even felt bored saying it.
A fun, engaging strategy session.
How can we reword it that's going to resonate with people beyond strategy? Because, like we said earlier, it's overused.
So
ChatGPT can give you a strategy. What's the difference?
Yeah, but it can't replicate those interactions between people and the learning in real time that this process is going to take you through. So if you think in terms like 30% of and these are not my data, this is not my work, so I'm just regurgitating somebody else's experience, but 30%
other sets of data are available. This is what you have to say.
30% of all strategies fail. So the ones that are most successful are the ones that focus on the strategy, the future part, where we want to be, and then they focus on developing the organization so it's inspired to deliver that strategy. If you can get those two things right and they work together rather than independently, you'll be much more successful at delivering strategy. So
I wonder how many are even started. If 30 fail, I bet you the number of started is higher. So like probably like 20% of all strategies that have been written will actually even begin to start.
Yeah,
so the amount of small businesses I know that had a strategy workshop, not via me or us, and everyone's walked out fired up. I've been in some of them, and then the next week nothing's changed. No one's doing it.
So I think you've touched on, perhaps why consultants are given such a bad rap at the moment. Because I think a lot of the work that people do is good, it's valuable, but they'll go in and they'll leave it with you. And to your point, your experience is, well, that's great, but 5 minutes later, it's already starting to fail. So where you mentioned building the foundations, talking about myself, what I've done and what Orca is aiming to achieve. Obviously, we'll go in and we work with an organisation to help build those foundations, so that they can actually go through that process within their own minds of understanding what is involved. It's a big commitment. It's a big commitment to go through a proper strategic process that will embrace the whole organisation and bring everybody, move everybody forward at the same pace. And, not everybody necessarily within the business is going to be capable of doing that. So you've also then got to upskill. You've got to work with people to help them, have the skill set that's required to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And if you are serious about it, then committing a couple of days off-site to designing the strategy and the plans that are going to back it up and help make it a reality, that's a big commitment for a business to make, because you're taking a lot of experience out of the business over a couple of days. But if you're serious about it and you understand the benefits of going through that process, you believe in the power of people and the talent that you've got in your business, and you want to help those people as well as your business grow in real time through a process that's equally, gonna deliver success for people in the long term, then it's a worthwhile investment. And then on top of that, going back to your point about, failing 5 minutes later, we work with the organisation to ensure that we don't just disappear. We don't just hand it over and say, there you go, all the best. Maybe call us in 6 months if you've got something else you want help with. We work with them. So we're taking them on a journey, for lack of a better phrase. We've been through the pain barriers in the past, so we can anticipate what those are going to look like for a business, and we can facilitate them through it. And then we can manage the process with them so that they're actually learning the skills required over time to do that themselves through a real-time sort of learning experience that we can then, at some point, when both parties are comfortable with this, walk away knowing that we've given them the skill set required to continue to deliver that strategy successfully. So we've given them, through the process, what they need. And there is there's a time scale to that. Some companies will be ready for that sooner than others. Some will never want to do that. They'll be quite comfortable helping or letting consultants like us go in and continue to manage that process for them. But yeah, like I say, I think to your experience, people are going to sell a strategy, hand it over, best of luck, give us a call if it breaks. That for us is not something that works, and that's not a process that we apply.
And I think also as well, the thing is, if somebody was going to run a strategy, then they would have at least tried by now. And I think that it's the thing that comes, if you're not used to it and you're not used to the way of working that way, it's the thing that comes last. The phone is going to be more urgent than a strategy. Now, in real world, it's not. But in the there and now, the urgency of the phone ringing is harder to ignore than maybe I should sit down with the team and discuss this at the moment. And I think I just wrote something down here quickly, similar to why I used to get frustrated with marketing at the beginning, is I wanted to, put £10 in, get £20 out, done, easy, no testing, let's go. Strategy is the same. It's a slow input, but then it's a compounded fast output with minimal disruption as you go down. And you can still adapt, you can still change, but you're only adapting 5-10 degrees left and right versus at the beginning, if you're running without a strategy, you're literally running, going, this is great, this is great, this is great, hurdle, don't know what that is, okay, let's go right. And you've got to literally veer right all the way around. And then all of a sudden, another hurdle, all the way left, didn't know that, let's go back on ourselves and then quickly go back out. And I think that's the thing, isn't it?
So, well, I agree. And I think that's why Orca Intelligence exists, and why as a brand, what orcas typically do, they're known for being very innovative, right? So they'll...
Orca reference, I love orcas.
Yeah, well, you do love
I mentioned that on the last one.
Well, you've adopted one, haven't you? So
I have, or we have adopted one, yeah.
Who's we?
The pod owns it, yeah.
Oh, I didn't realise we so have I got...
adopted only one orca, which is rubbish. And I said to Alison, when we're doing really well, we're all going to go to Finland and swim with them.
Well, I'm up for that.
Exactly. So if there's no more podcasts after Finland, you'll know that they're not as friendly as we think. But I'm sure
there will be, yeah. But so they learn, right, through the process of doing. So if you think about the way that as a pod, they'll all poke their heads up above the surface of the water and assess where they are in relation to their prey. They're trying to catch a seal on a big iceberg. They've learned, and this wouldn't have happened first time round, but they've learned that, if Brian, you get together with Laura because you're really good at making this kind of
good whale names, though.
Yeah, sonic boom, that swim underneath it and try and crack the ice. That's not happened instantaneously. They've gone through a process of learning. They've had the idea, they've tried it, they've failed, they've tried again, they've failed, up until a point where they've realised this is what we need to do and it works, and it cracks the ice, makes it smaller, and then they come back together and they say, great, right, we've done that. Now you three other, Harry, I've already used Brian, but give me a name, Michael, right? So they've all come together and said, right, now your job, go and make that wave that knocks it off. And they do that, and then they eat their prey, and then they're eating, and then they're happy, and then they go off. So that's an iterative process, right? So they've learned their strategy. They know what they want to achieve. They've got together as a pod. They've used their own individual power as a culture to come up with a solution. They've applied it in real time. They've failed, but they've come back and they've adapted. And then they've been successful. And then that makes them, the apex predator in their environment. And, as a way of visually describing the process of strategy, that's a good way of thinking about it. If you apply the intelligence of the Orca to an organization, and transpose that almost, then it's pretty powerful.
And without being very SeaWorld, we don't like sharks here, obviously. And sharks are kind of the other way. So sharks they're going to do it on their own. They're still very successful, but there's no way a shark's getting a seal off a piece of ice. Like, it cannot physically go to that point. So all it can do is do what it's doing, maybe more efficiently. It could probably do. It could try and do what it's doing in a different environment. So it could swim somewhere else and try the same process somewhere else. But realistically, it's not changing its approach. It's staying and doing what it's doing. And I know sharks aren't pods, so this doesn't really work. But I guess if you thought of it, say sharks were friendlier. I think so. I don't know much about sharks. I'm thinking of great whites. But say sharks were friendly and they did hang around together. Like, I'd imagine what would happen is one would go and attack and the others would go, what are they doing? Maybe we should do that. And then they follow by example. And you kind of get an okay process versus the orcas. The reason they can get sharks is because they're clever. They learn that if they tip a shark upside down, it's neutral. The shark doesn't know that's come into it every single time, but the orca knows. And it also shares that knowledge beyond its generation. Now, obviously, if we're looking at business generations, there's a big thing. I'm third generation in one of the businesses, and I think that I got some knowledge passed down. I'm not going to say I didn't, because I definitely did. But I think that the awareness now of passing that knowledge down, there's some things that are timeless, some sayings that are timeless, like don't be a busy fool. It's a very basic one. But my granddad said it to me and it made sense. My dad said it to me as well. So my granddad said it to my dad, obviously. And during those times, we've all been busy fools. So it didn't work, did it? But I think that the knowledge transfer and that kind of thing is massive. And the communication. The shark can't really communicate. So all they can do is visually see what he's up to or she's up to and think, okay, that makes sense. He's eating a fish, let's do that. As where the orcas are going, well, hang on a minute, let's just chill out, because we have to work half as hard here. We get to have a different kind of meal, which might be different. It's got options. I think that's it. It's got options. A shark has no options apart from same thing, different environment, same thing more often. Really. An orca's like, okay, well, fine. We'll swim to another part of the world. We'll take on a different strategy, like swimming onto a beach, grabbing a seal, and poor seals. It's all about seals today, but pulling a seal and pulling it in. And I think that although I didn't plan this podcast to be about whales and sharks, and it now is, I think it really does describe it. I think it's a really good way of describing it. So obviously you've written something down there, Tim. What were you going to say?
Actually, I don't know what your plans are for your next podcast, but in terms of the the shared knowledge, I think that's really interesting because, like I say, it gets passed down, and if you're in an organisation that believes in the value of shared knowledge and having that knowledge passed down, which isn't that you sound like, well, that's pretty sensible, right? But not all organisations are like that. People sometimes there's a big thing about some, like, I don't know if it's CEOs or just managers or stuff that keep it to themselves because they're almost scared that if they give it away, then someone else. And I guess that relates to a shark again. See, I hate sharks, but where if a shark, is it getting it right?
I hate them. If a shark, nah, it's about orcas, isn't it?
Well, it is.
Yeah,
I can see much.
I mean, yeah, they're okay.
I would want to meet one, not face to face.
No, but you would want to meet an orca.
yeah, I do. Yeah, that's true.
So a shark again, like, it probably doesn't want to tell people what it's up to because there's 4 or 5 sharks in the area, and others know how it hunts. It loses the game because it doesn't work collective.
Yeah. Also, I was just thinking, like, that's the power of working collaboratively, working together, having great forms of communication, because obviously every pod has their own culture, they have their own form of communication,
And a leader.
And a leader. And yeah, the passing down of information is critical to success over time. And if you're trying to create something, a long-term vision, sustainable growth, then you need to have that mentality. So I think that's, but that might be something to dig a little bit deeper into.
Yeah.
Next time around, without wanting to sort of shoehorn that particular topic into.
No, definitely. I think it's relevant. I think it's relevant. I think it's relevant in this day and age as well, because you've got a situation where everyone's talking about culture, everybody's talking about collaboration, everybody's talking about working together, which is all great. It is great, and obviously we believe in it. I took a sigh there and a break. That's not emphasis on is it or isn't it great, but it is. And I think the thing is, though, it's how do you do it, and what's the right way of doing it, and what's the wrong way. And I don't know if there is a right and wrong, but there's probably a guidance. I think some companies, and I've been guilty of this, have given a lot of freedom to everybody, and everybody's got an input, which is fantastic. But then when you don't get a decision, that makes it hard. I've never run it as a dictator, really. Never done that. So I don't really know that. So I think it's about getting the balance and digging into that of shared knowledge, and leadership would be really, really, really good.
Yeah.
So
knowledge and leadership.
With that note, then, what piece of actionable advice can you give somebody that isn't about sharks or orcas or any other sea creature?
Somebody, anyone.
Well, no. So it's business related. So you've got to think the people are going to be small business, medium business, but something actionable and preferably on the subject of strategy.
So a business owner that may have been through the process of trying to grow their business, where they've got a little bit bigger and they've run themselves into the ground and they don't really feel like they've achieved an awful lot. If I was to talk to that person and they were looking for an alternative way of growing their business, what could they do from a practical perspective? I think they could embrace the idea of developing their team. And if you start to look at ways in which you can develop your team, then you can start to look at processes that's going to help them work collaboratively to achieve a common goal. If they haven't got a common goal to work towards, they kind of reverse engineer it. If they haven't got a common goal to work towards, it's very difficult to bring people together and get them to work as a collective. So think about what that common goal is, what your vision is, make it relatable, communicate that to people within your business, get some buy-in, and then think about how it is you're going to move the business forward from that point. Because once people buy into what it is you're trying to achieve, and even go one step beyond, build it together. You can go to them, you can take it to your team and say, look, we want to grow collectively. What do you think the future needs to look like? And then you can build something collectively that people can buy into. And I think that gives you a lot more, you'll have a greater opportunity to achieve success in the long term by doing it that way, rather than trying to have a vision and just force it on people.
Yeah, I think that's really fair, and I think that's good advice. I think that when businesses get there, they normally do one or two things, well, one or three, I guess. They stop altogether, they downsize, or they struggle the way through. And a business is usually limited to the people that are bottlenecking it on the top. So I think that if they are at that point and they're struggling and they're feeling a bit under it, then yeah, it's a pause, get real feedback, get buy-in, and plan to move forward. Or if it isn't for you, because it's not for everybody, plan to scale backwards, but have a plan either way. I would say. Fair?
Yeah. I mean, I think the challenge, businesses that don't typically. So you are right. I just think in terms of businesses that grow, and having a mentality where you're invested in the development of people. if you believe in the development of people, then that only kind of gives you one route. I don't think you can downsize and have the ambition to develop people in the same way you'd need to grow.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, though, find themselves in a bigger business without even wanting to be there. So I think that's where they stop and pause and go, actually, is this something I want to do or not? Because moving from a team of 5, 6 to even a team of 12, it's tough. I mean, you've really got to challenge yourself. You've got to challenge your mindset. You've got to start taking things on that you're not used to. You can do a good job in a business with your own skill set to a small point. But I think that there's people that find themselves in a bigger business because people want to work with them, maybe, and not the business so much, or they are the business. Then all of a sudden, it's not right for everybody. And there's some people I know that have downscaled and they're so happy. I think either way, it's about stopping and working out what your route is, and asking the team as well what their goal is. There might be somebody in that team that's more suited to leading it. I know companies that have had a founder start it, they've stepped sideways as a sales manager, and one of the teams become the CEO. And that was how they did it. And that was through stopping and actually really thinking about, do we want to move this forward? Yes, they wanted to be a part of it, but they also realised that strategy, accountability, team management, leadership wasn't their skill set in a business sense, and they stepped aside and did director of sales, and the company's thriving, absolutely thriving. And I respected them for doing that, because I think that's a really tough one from you starting it to step aside and let someone else run it. But business is about getting people around you that do the bits that you're not as good at. Anyway, I think we're going to end up on another tangent if we're not careful.
Yeah, we're never ending. But
have you got anything else to add just before we close?
No, well, I mean, do you know what? This might be slightly off point, but I had something flick up on YouTube a couple of days ago from Michael J. Fox.
Okay.
And I think it's difficult running a business, at the best of times. You have to have a certain mentality. You need all these things: the resilience, the leadership. I think you need to have a bit of hope and optimism to make it successful and sustainable. And he said, and I love this quote, was with gratitude, optimism is sustainable. And I think if you can look at what you're grateful for within your business, and at the same time think in terms of what you want it to achieve in the long term, that puts you on a good path that can sustain you when you might hit some rocky ground, because, looking to grow a business over a 3-5 year period is not easy. And if you can remain optimistic and be grateful for what you have, then that's a good place to start. I sort of took something from that. I don't know if it's relevant, but
I think that's just made me think we've got another podcast there as well.
Yeah, actually. Possibly.
Because I heard something the other day that there was a study where they took people that were pessimistic and optimistic, and they put a £50 note on the floor, and the pessimistic people didn't see it.
We're in trouble.
There we go. You got an alarm on the building for some reason. We'll actually cut this bit.
Yeah, probably.
So I was just carrying back on. If it's just skipped back in, it's because we had an alarm go off in the building. But yeah, they were saying that they've got pessimists and optimists to walk past £50 note, and the pessimists didn't pick it up. The optimists all found it. So I think that there's another whole podcast there.
It's valuable. Yeah. Cool.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank Tim. Thanks very much for coming on today. And we will have another podcast in a few weeks' time. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Tim.